two things tonight. The first one is to move ahead in the Gemara. The second is, if there's time, and I do have a hard stop at 9 o'clock, a ritual committee meeting, some of the people on the ritual committee. So I'd like to see if we can look at the 3 lines in the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah on the question of Baal Tosif. Like practically, we saw a lot of different things and different views, different approaches, trying to understand it from different perspectives. But like bottom line, does Baal Tosif make it into the halacha or not? And in what sense is that true? So that's the second piece. I'm leaving that for the end. So if people want to drop off because they can't handle talking about Baal Tosif anymore, you can slip away. I won't tell anyone. So let's go to the Gemara. Lamed Aleph Amud Bet. We're at the 2 dots. The next section of the Mishnah is dealing with the lulav that comes from an Asheira tree or a lulav that comes from an Hanidachat. Asheira is one of the types of trees that were worshipped as idolatry, and therefore that's it would seem that's forbidden. And Rashi, back on page 29b on the Mishnah, explained to us that it is a tree that is itself worshipped. The Hanidachat means that it's from a wayward city. The Torah in Parshat Re'eh speaks about the wayward city and describes that it is meant to be destroyed. Not only it, but everything in it. The property, the movables, everything to be razed. Whether there ever was an Hanidachat is not a discussion for now. My understanding is no, but it's like Ben Sora Mora, lo have lo nivra type thing, but it's Drosh v'kabel schar, just to tell us how bad things could get, Hanidachat, Rashi on page 29b explains to us something crucial that will be very helpful for us on 31b. So flip back to 29b again whenever you're learning, and you come to those 2 dots. You're in the next part of the Mishnah, especially if you spend a long time doing other things. Go back to see it in the source in the Mishnah. Why? Sometimes Rashi on that section will already give you some information that will be helpful. So Rashi 29b. It's already slated to be burned. Dichtiv ve'et kol shlala tikbots, to collect all of its spoils, meaning everything that's in it. Velulav boy shiur dalet tfachim. We will learn soon, Kidul Kaman on page 32b, we will learn the important piece of information that a lulav has a minimum height requirement, 4 tfachim. V'keven dahai l'sreifakai, ein shiura kayam dikisaruf dami. Since once something is already designated as meant to be burned, it is as if it is already burned. It halachically does not exist. It doesn't have a measurement. Technically, you could use a ruler to measure it. That's of no moment. It is no longer an object from a halachic vantage point. And when you have something that requires a shear, that shear is no longer extant. Another way of saying it, which we'll see right now in the Gemara, now turn to 31b, is kitute mechtat shiure. Its size, its measurement was truncated, and you require that minimum length of the lulav in order for it to be kosher. So 3 lines down from the on the wide lines, the Gemara says, Shel Asheira v'Shel Hanidachat v'Shel Asheira apostle. Is an Asheira, a lulav of Asheira actually not kosher? It's invalidated. Va'amar Rava, we have a statement from Rava elsewhere in Shas. Lulav, if we have time, we're going to look it up in Chulin. We'll see. He states, Lulav shel avodah zarah lo yitol, v'im natal kosher. You're not allowed to take a lulav of avodah zarah. However, if you took it, it's still kosher, which is very strange. I would think that the Asheira...
Lulav of avodah zarah. What does he mean by lulav shel avodah zarah? It's something that's like an Asheira tree, isn't it? It's worshipped.
So we'll look at Rashi in a second. Yeah, excellent point. But let's finish in the Gemara, 3 lines up from the bottom now, and Rashi in the Gemara first. But that is the question. What does that mean, shel avodah zarah? In what sense is that true? The Gemara clarifies, Hacha ba'Asheira de Moshe askinan. We're talking about the Asheira of the time period of Moshe Rabbeinu, where there was a specific directive in the Torah, also in Parshat Re'eh, at the beginning of the Parsha, Va'asherehem tisrafun ba'esh, to burn those in a fire specifically. That's what we're talking about. And in that case, the kitute mechtat shiure, that is a reality that has been truncated in size. So I'm mentioning before, daikanami tikatane dumya di'irani dachat shmamina. And also we can infer this from the fact that it is just like an irani dachat, Asheira, just like irani dachat. Just as an irani dachat, everything is as if it's burned, i.e. it doesn't exist. So too, something that is meant to be destroyed by burning, i.e. the Asheira trees found in Eretz Yisrael from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, the initial Asheira trees that are there. So that also doesn't have any measurement, and it's an Ephes, it's zero, and therefore it doesn't have the Daled Tfachim, it doesn't have the height measurement. Now let's dial back and see the next layer. This was just a basic layer. It's a lulav of avodah zarah. You mustn't take it, but if you took it, it's kosher. But the Ar Mishnah says Shel Shera not going to work. You can't do Shel Shera, which I think for many of us resonated. It was used for avodah zarah. Now you're going to pick it up. Isn't that like mitzvah bab avera or something? So the Gemara clarifies, no, when the Mishnah mentioned Asheira, it's not general Asheira. It's specifically the Asheira of the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. What's the connection between this and Ir Hanidachat? The fact that the two are mentioned together in the same Mishnah is to tell us that as is the fate of the one, so is going to be the fate of the other, which is to say that even before it burns, it is still is already considered to be without size. It's, halachically speaking, without size, without dimension. Now, that might be in stark contrast to other kinds of objects that were used for avodah zarah. And Benny already posed the question, so let's see what Rashi says on this. What do you mean shel avodah zarah? Shel avodah zarah can mean several different kinds of things. In the service of avodah zarah, or actually like totemism, people bowing down to the object. And it's not clear from the Gemara which one it is. Further, there is a connection between the burning of the Asheira trees and the Ir Hanidachat, in as much as they actually happen to both be within the same section of the Torah. They're both in Parsha Re'eh, chapter 12 for the Asheira, chapter 13 for Ir Hanidachat. They're related. They're in the same Parsha, quite literally, Parsha Re'eh. So look with me at Rashi. Lulav shel avodah zarah. Rashi writes, "Sheshimshu bo le'avodah zarah lechabed lefanei karka." It's not that it's the idol, but it's that you laid it out in front of the idol in order to bring honor to the idol. So you don't think, nobody thinks that the tree is some kind of representation of spirits or whatever it is, but it is the decor that enhances what the avodah zarah looks like. Inami, alternatively, she'avodata balulav lahaviro lefanao ulazarka bo. Perhaps the manner in which the object of idolatry is worshipped is with a special palm frond. And a palm frond brought into a religious service in which it's going to be waved or thrown in front of an idol is in and of itself an act of idolatry. It's the service of the idol using this object. In neither case, according to Rashi, is the case of a lulav shel avodah zarah the same thing as an Asheira tree. To my understanding, the Asheira tree was actually the idol, meaning people planted it and then they bow down to it. You ask yourself, we get this philosophy for another time, how could they be so ridiculous? It was a different time. The truth is, I think it's more sophisticated than that, even though we do mock it and it sounds crazy to us. In antiquity, it really was a particular temptation that we have trouble even wrapping our heads around.
They have Palm Sunday. They have Ash Wednesday from the palm branches.
Yeah.
Not only that,
It's not to an idol.
in India, they worship a certain tree, and they
Yeah.
put around it like a bama, a little place where they can put offerings.
Yep. I mean, you do see vestiges of this in the world today in 2021. right? I'm not making faith claims or polemical claims against this or that religion. I don't know enough about them to say, but the point is, if it was already used for some idolatrous purpose, and Rashi gives us two possibilities. One, it's an adornment. The other is it's actually the object within the worship. In either case, it's not itself being worshipped as an object of idolatry like an Asheira. So Rashi already there gave us the distinction. But initially, the Gemara kind of collapsed the two categories and said, well, Rava somehow thinks you could use a lulav of avodah zara, yet we know from our Mishnah that a lulav made from an Asheira tree is burnt. It's zero, doesn't have the right shear. Now, without going too far down the rabbit hole, Art, I'm ignoring your question, not because I'm ignoring it, we just didn't get there yet. It's a good question. When there is an object that it was itself worshipped by an idolater, it is actually possible under certain circumstances for that object to be nullified. It would make what's called bittul on the object such that it would lose its sacralized, in quotation marks, character for avodah zara, and then could be acquired by a Jew. If a Jew worships idols, it's indelible. What?
Only if the goy nullifies it, not a Jew.
Yeah.
Yeah, because now he's in effect saying there's no mamash to it.
Yeah, I mean, the Jew cannot nullify that which does not belong to them. So the goy is nullifying it, right? But a Jew who worships idols, lo aleinu, so that object has an indelible status on it. This is a big sugya in Masechet Avodah Zarah, in fact.
Right.
But here, we're trying to understand the difference between the two, and the Gemara has sort of clarified that really what we're talking about in this instance is the Asheira de Moshe, meaning it's on the list of objects that actually were already worshipped. And wherever they were planted in the land of Israel, they were meant to be burned down so that no one would worship them any longer. But it was literally the species, wherever it was found, it was considered by the idolaters to be something, again, sacrosanct or some such thing. And it was not in the service of an idol, it was the idol. As opposed to Rava's case, where the object is used either, again, in the service or the adornment of, or the service of as such. Now, Art, you're asking an excellent question about the 4 tefachim, 3 tefachim. The shear for lulav happens to be 4. There are other elements where the shear is less. It's 3. We're going to get to that. And I'm tabling discussion about 4 versus 3 because we're going to get into a lot of that quantification and computation, actually, of elements of these measurements further along. We won't get there tonight, but it's a significant question.
May I make a suggestion?
Please.
Understanding lechabed, lefanea et hakarka means in modern Hebrew to sweep the karka in front of the lechabed et hakarka means also until today and they use all over today too. People use brooms that are really branches to clean the land.
We'll see an example of that later today. In fact, yeah, we'll be seeing that further along. We're going to have a case like that about a lulav that was actually made into that. But the point is, in either case, when I say adornment, it's doing something to fix up the space in front of the idol.
Improve and clean, yeah.
So something of that nature. Yeah. And the point is that it was a shimush for the idol, which is not the actual moment of worship of the idol. So that's the sort of the idea. Now, if you were paying close attention, which you might have been, we don't have time to see the whole thing inside. It'll take way too long. But if you go back to 29b, when it said Asheira, Rashi made clear that it's an Ilan she'ovdin oto avodah zara. In order, he just set it up so that when you get to page 31b, that's going to be in contrast to the lulav shel avodah zara, which means sheshimshu bo le'avodah zara l'chabed lefanei karka. Inami shavodah tabelulav lahavir lefanei lezarkabo, meaning it's not the object of idolatry. So in other words, when you just learn the Rashis on the Mishnah, then you go here, oh, okay, we got the distinction. That's before we get to the idea that, oh, it's really the Asheira de Moshe, where we have a specific directive that it must be burned, and therefore it is as if it has no measurement at all, no height, and therefore it fails the height test. We'll keep going in the Gemara for now tonight so we could cover ground. If we have time, I want to finish up the last halachic piece about Baal Tosif. And if there's yet more time, I want to go beneath the surface here to see some of the issues regarding this particular piece of Gemara. There's a Gemara in Chulon Daf Pei Tet that's relevant to this question about the Ir Hanidachat and the mitzvah of Kisui Hadam. There's a Ritva we would see tonight. We won't get to Tosfot because it's just too long, but at least we'll see something. But all of that, first, let's skim along the surface, shall we? So we make some more headway in this parak. Does that sound fair? Good? Everyone still hear me? We're good? Okay. So let's go. Okay. So now, I actually brought tonight the updated picture book. So we can have it on the screen while I go. You'll see it momentarily. I'll put it up, but let's read a little bit. I'll put the pictures up so we don't get bamboozled flipping back and forth. Okay. Nektam Rosho is the Mishnah describes the top of the lulav was lopped off. Rashi on the Mishnah on 29b just says it's puzzle lo have a hadar. It's not nice looking anymore. It's missing. It was just the top was chopped off and it doesn't look nice. It's a psul of hadar. So Amar Rav Huna said last line lo shanu ela nektam aval nizdak kasher. If it got a crack on the top of it, it still would be a kosher lulav. The nizda kasher, is that possible? The Gemara recoils in horror. How could that be? Vatanya, didn't we learn lulav kafuf, kavutz, saduk? Right there it says saduk. Akum domil magal pasul. They're all not kosher. And here you have a bright that specifically says if it has a crack in it, it's not kosher. Yet we have this memra moment ago, the facing page from Rav Huna, that really nisdak is kosher. So kosher or not kosher. So how could this be saying this, making this point? That's the Gemara's idea. It keeps going. We'll come back to it in a minute. So charut pasul. If it is charut, if it has a particular look, charut, I'll just tell you, it means it's already like we see palm trees generally, that all the branches on the from the shedra, the spine, they're all opened and they're basically perpendicular and it's hardened that way already. So that's not good. But if it's like it's charut, but it's not yet completely open, it hasn't hardened that way. So in that case, kosher. So if you look at Rashi, the top Rashi on the page, or actually, sorry, go back to 31b, Rashi. I skipped the Rashi before. Okay. Yeah, we're going to come back to the other Rashi, but the second last Rashi, Nizdak, Nizdiku, Roshe Ha'alin. I skipped the other Rashi because I told it to you outside, but we'll go back to drill down if we go back to the lower levels, under the ground or under the water rather, to get a little deeper into the issue of Asheira and Avodah Zarah and everything related. Second to last Rashi there, Nizdak, Nizdiku, Roshe Ha'alin. The tops of the leaves are cracked. Kafuf. Rosho kafuf ke'egmon means it's hooked over. It looks like a fishing hook. Domot leish gibein looks like a hunchback. Ve'hazakin shiroshen, an elderly person shiroshen sachin ukfufin lamata, that they're hunched over. So that if it looks like that, that's not good. What's kavutz? Rashi, top of 32a. Sheyotzin b'shedrush la'uktzin kimin kotzin. It has thorns and brambles that are sticking out of the lulav. Akum domala magal chadamiltahi. It's referring to one thing. If it's turned to one side, like it looks like a sickle, so it's sort of curved. Charut means kasha shenaset chariyot shekein derech halulav alav noshrim biyamot hagshamim v'ashev mitkashev nase eitz. In the rainy season, the leaves start falling down, and the spine hardens and it becomes wooden because they open up. Domot l'charut hitchilit kashut started getting hard. V'adayin lo na'aseh, but it didn't happen yet. Now go back in the Gemara. The Gemara, I'm on the second line of the Gemara on 32a. Amarav Papa de Avid kehimnik. If you made it like a hymnik is basically, it looks like a fork. It's split, but it looks like a fork the way it's growing. I'm going to show you pictures in a minute. Akum doma l'magal. What is that? Akum doma l'magal. What is it referring to? And it's turned in some way that it looks like a sickle.
Sickle, yeah.
Right? Amarava lo amaran ela lefanav. It's only if it's bending forwards. Ela avala achrav. But if it's backwards, if it's sort of angling up, so that would be kosher. Biryatehu. That's the way it's supposed to go. So that's fine. Amar Rav Nachman. Litzdadin kilafanav dami. Vil amri la kilachrav dami. What if it's leaning to one side? Machloket. Some say it means it's like it's ahead, so that's not good. Some say it's backwards, and that's kosher. So Amar Rava, Hai Lulava de Salik Bechad Hutza Bal Mumu Upasel. If you have a lulav that has the leaves only coming out of one side of the shedra, the spine. It's meant to have leaves. Everyone's seen lulavim. They come on either side. If it's only on one side, that would be itself a puzzle. So that's the first part of the Gemara. It's kind of technical. And of course, the advent of these coloring books made it so much easier to figure out what's flying. So we'll just see, it's in the picture book. Take 3 minutes. From Hod V'Hadar, Ahod V'Hadar Sukka. It's that Sukka book that I like to use when we're in person in the Beit Midrash. And it, lo and behold, much of the book, or something similar to the book, is printed in the back of the Masifta Gemara Masechet Sukka, and it's just amazing. So here it is. So it tells you that the way it is, this you can't see so well, but if I sort of zoom in, it's hooked around. The top of it is completely over. And so it doesn't really have a point here. It comes down. So that's like, that's kafuf. Sorry, let me go down first. That's the egamon. It's like a fishing hook. So that's not good. Kafuf means it's bent over on one side. Kavutz, you can see the little thorns or something sticking out of it. Little bristles. We'll skip that because we're not doing Tosfot right now. Here's Akum Doma Lamagal. It looks like a sickle. There's a sickle for those who never saw one. If, however, it's pointing up, so the spine is along the top, and then you're holding that one would be good, but it has to be straight back. Cannot be, it looks like a sickle. The difference is that when it's going down, that's a sickle, because that's the way the sickle is used, but apparently this way is considered kosher. So goes the halacha. Here we have Litzdadin if it's off to one side. This sort of bird's eye view, it's off to one side. Now charut, this is what we imagine very often when we think of palm trees. This is charut already, this whole area. These are not good lulavim, because this is the shadra, this is the spine, and the whole thing is open and it's hardened already. Not going to be good. And this is the Rashi that we had already seen previously on the top of 32a, right? The Beit Yosef added that the leaves are still attached, but they open to the sides, and the place where they're attached to the spine, they got very, very hard like a tree. So that's no longer kosher. Doma l'charot means it started happening, but it hasn't yet happened. You correct this by putting one of those kosher lach. It's not even clear that you need that. It's only started. So when you're in the store next year, God willing, Ba'aleinu Latova, you look for some of these things. You can buy guides on the market that will show you the pictures. You could ask someone who's in the store who's knowledgeable. The hemnek case is right here. Looks like a fork. And you could tell because when you hold it up, it looks like two lulavim that are attached to each other. It really, when you get down to it at the seam, this little area down here shows that it's actually split between the two of them. So that would postulate as well. And the hymnik, the word hymnik itself is based on this. The Meiri points out that it is the way that you would call it a protractor, but according to some, it's actually what is used by a sofer as a pair of tongs to hold the cloth. It's like a clip. So it looks like that, and that's the hymnik up here. Okay, so that's as far as we got so far. We're skimming along this. So everybody clear so far? Okay. Again, just to make some headway, to feel, someone asked you, did you go learn Gemara? Yeah, we learned Gemara. We went through some lines. It's also part of learning. So 5, 6 lines down from the top, third and fourth words, nifritzu alav. The leaves actually became detached. Amarav Papa nifritzu da'avi kichufaya. That's what Judah was talking about before. You made it into a broom. You took the disconnected leaves and tied it on, so it actually now became a broom. So nifritzu alav, that is puzzle. That does not work.
He's using the same verb, mechabdim et habayit. You see, you say mechabdim et hakarka, mechabdim et habayit.
Yeah.
Same verb.
Ashkova sheba mechabdin et habayit ve'osin ota me'olin shel lulav hatlushin me'ashadra disconnected ve'ogin me'en harbe me'od. You tie it up around it. Again, it's to beautify the area that you have in front, wherever you're sweeping. That's the point. Yeah. Nifradu. What is nifradu? It's the next line in the Mishnah. There's nifritzu and nifradu. Nifradu is they separated. The ifrud afrude, that they separated from each other, that the tops of them have already opened up. To me, it sounds just like charut, quite frankly. That's what it is. Just they've already parted ways. That's nifradu. So, but maybe they haven't gotten hard yet. Then it would be still good. But if it is already hard, not good, right? So, the ifrud afrude. Okay, by Rav Papa. Here's a question from Rav Papa. Nachlika hatiomet mahu. What if there's a split in the tiomet? What's the tiomet? If you look at the spine of a lulav, essentially the middle leaf is actually a double leaf. It's called a tiomet. Rashi tells us that's what it's called. Nachlika hatiomet shnei alin elyonim emtsaim shisham hashedra kula. Kala, excuse me. There the shedra ends. Nechku zemizat, they split one from the other. V'nizdika hashedra ad ha'olin shlamatim, and the spine is cracked until the leaves that are underneath it. That's basically what the Gemara says. Yeah, but that's what's transpired. Now we'll see it. Let's see it just, I guess, as a picture, because that's helpful to get on the screen. It sort of clarifies it. It's this. The top one already came apart. Mm-hmm. So he tells you right here, the Mishnah Berurah writes, Allah ha'imtzai afilu nizdak rak mikzato shemachmat nachlika atyomet dad harbe achronim she'ein lepaslo. Even though many achronim say it's not pasol, nikomakim kevish nitrake chev hasedek achnira kishnayim pasol v'yishlizar harbe bezet. Mr. Berurah still feels that since it's already a wide split, once it looks like two separate lulavs, that would be pasol. So you have to be careful, even though in a case where it only has a little bit of a split. So oftentimes when people buy their lulav, they spend a lot of time trying to see, is the tiomet really connected? There are other psulim as well, but let's say just this one, that it's not split open. Because if it's split open a little bit, maybe it's still good. But as soon as you're going to get to more of a shnitrachiv, a sedek, shnir kishnayim, that would be pasol. So you don't want to get down to that point. Yeah. Here are some other examples. Here's Bechad Hutz. I don't know if you could see it. The Shedra is just here, and there's only leaves on one side. There's no other side of leaves. Nifritzu, they got disconnected, and you tied them on to make it into a broom, basically. Here's Nifridu. It looks to me like not so different than the Charut case. And Rashi here is quoted as saying that the tops separated like the date palm, and they're no longer flush up against the spine, but lower down, they are more connected. That's here. So that would be good enough. That happens usually later on in the festival. Nachlika hatyomet. So Rashi writes these are the top two leaves. Again, that's where the Shedra ends, and they split one from the other. And there's a split. For Rashi, the split is until the leaves that are underneath. Meaning the split, once it gets to all the way down here, that's when it's for sure not kosher, based on the Gra. So it has to go till here. What's going on here? There are other branches that have already reached this point. Lower down branches that are coming off the Shedra are reaching this point. This was the highest point out here, but now it's split. So it's split to all the way down here. That's what's not kosher. What we'll see, not tonight, but you'll just remember that we talked about it, is that Tosfot talk about the question of a case like this. We'll have to look at it inside. Actually, I don't know how to explain it to you without going down into that. So never mind. We'll get there. We're not there yet. Another case in Tosfot's going to be Nitla HaTiomet, where the Tiomet, the middle part, is just missing. And when you close it up, you don't actually necessarily see it so much. Here's Nitla HaTiomet again, where there's a part missing. One side of the Tiomet is missing. What happens there? So those are just different examples of what can come up. Let's move on. So,
Nachlika Tiomet.
yeah. So now, a buyer of Papa, Nachlika Tiomet. We just talked about Tiomet right now. Mo, what should happen? Tashma. The Amar, in another version of this Gemara, we have Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, Amar, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. So the Gemara version of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Nitla Tiomet Pasul. If it's missing, it's Pasul. My love, who adin Nachlika. I mean, how is that different than when we talked about the Nachlika Tiomet and Nitla Tiomet? Isn't that exactly the same thing? Lo, says the Gemara, Nitla Shani, Dahachasirle. Because when you have it removed, it's actually missing, as opposed to Nachlika, where there really would be a question. Ika de Amre, Amar, Rabbi Yochanan, Amar B'Shu ben Levi, Nachlika Tiomet Nasa Kemish Nitla Tiomet Upasol. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is teaching that if it's split, it's as if it was completely removed, and it's automatically not good. All right. So the idea that the tiomet is crucial to the kashrut of the lulav. Next thing, Rabbi Yehuda. If you look back in the 32, flip back to 29b. 29b. We have Rabbi Yehuda Omer Yagdenu Milamala and Sine Hara Barzel Ksherot. Yeah. And Art, you had pointed this out before. We won't get this far tonight, but we said you need 4 tefachim for the lulav. It says here lulav sheyesh bo shlosha tefachim. We don't know the bo kasher. So clearly there's discrepancy about what the number actually is meant to be. But on these words, Yagdenu milamala, it turns out is not just for the sake of beautification of a lulav bundle that it needs to be connected to itself, but actually the words Yagdenu milamala specifically refer to what happens if it's nifredu olav, if the leaves already split apart, so you have to tie them up. That's Rabbi Yehuda's point. Rashi on 29b. Im nifredu olav yagdem shihu olin sham hashedra kisha'ar lulavim, that it will be going straight up. So those kusherlach that you have tied around your top of your lulav, there's all sorts of nice reasons why this would be 3 rings and this, what they represent. Halacha. Rabbi Yehuda says you need that because if it starts splitting apart, that wouldn't be good. You close it up by tying it. That's how it's kosher. What's Sine Hara Barzel? The Gemara will explain what it is. Okay? Then we have the statement that they're ksherot. Those lulavim from Sine Hara Barzel are kosher. We'll find out what they are in a minute. Even though they have small leaves, according to Rabbi Yehuda, and they don't follow along the spine. We'll see the picture shortly. They look like quanta on the shedra. They're little packets of leaves. They're not. It's not a one big structure that we expect. Go back to 32a, and we keep going. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Tani Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Tarfon, Kapot Tamarim, Kapfot. According to Rabbi Yehuda, The reason why the Torah went out of its way to tell you kapot tmarim is to tell you kafot, tie it, right, to secure it. Im haya parud yachtefenu, you tie it up. Amar le Ravina Rav Ashi, mimai dahai kapot tmarim de lulavahu, ema charuta be'ena kafot veleka. Why do you think, Ravina said to Rav Ashi, that kapot tmarim meant specifically, or he actually asked him, how do you know that this kapot tmarim is of a lulav? Maybe you should say it's the charuta itself, be'ena kafot veleka, but it doesn't have kafot, and therefore it can't be. Ve'ema upta kafot michlal de'ika parud. I have to show you the pictures. There's no way to know what's flying otherwise. Here's a picture. These sections down here. Yeah. The lulav grows out of it. But this base over here, it's also connected to the lulav. Maybe that's the lulav. So the chiddush here is, no, it has to be something, Rabbi Yehuda is saying, something that you can tie up. This doesn't need to be tied. It's a solid block. So it has to be something that has the capacity to spread apart, and therefore you're tying it, and that's what kafot means. But it can't be that it's the stuff underneath, because it's just much too solid. Here's the upta. Has no branches at all. It's literally the stalks down below. Just zoom in here. The stalks down below that don't actually have leaves. So it's the lowest part of the lulav. Here's Rashi quoted. Such a great thing that they did here. They put the Rashis right with it. What is upta? Estila. Me'ikar hadakel. I don't know what estila means, but it's the main part of the tree. Shehu chalak. It's smooth. Ve'ein anaf yotzei mimenu lekan lekan. There aren't any branches going from one side to the other. She'ein lecha kafot emenu. And you're not going to have kapot. There are not going to be any kind of fruits that are going to come out of it. Not from down here. Right? So just to consider, soon there's going to be a suggestion of the kufra. Another element that looks like it's charuta as well, but it's younger. Oh, it didn't get fat yet. All right, so we'll get to it. All right, let's go back into Gemara. Everybody still with me? I hope.
Yep.
I haven't seen everybody the whole night because I'm on the wrong view here. Yeah, we're good?
Yep.
Okay, Jeff, for a minute, I thought you were literally standing there wearing a party hat and smiling, and I was getting nervous. But that's your off screen. So, okay, I feel good now. All right, moving right along. It's like, wasn't expecting that. Look back into Gemara. Maybe it's the charuta. No, but be'ina kafot veleka, as we said, can be tied, and he can't tie that. Be'ima upta, right? Kafot, kafot. It's a play on the words. Michlal de'ika parud, b'hai kafot ve'omed la'olam. It's always tied up because it's always just one smooth stalk, and therefore is nothing to talk about. Ve'ema kufra, again, something along the lines of what we saw before, the idea of the charut, that it's already like almost open, or it's younger, but it's on the road to going there. And Rashi actually says it's like the charuta, but it's younger, so it's not as thick, and potentially you could squeeze it together. So what does Abaye say? Amar Abaye, very beautiful. You could use it at in your sukkah. The Torah says, or at least Sefer Mishlei says, that the ways of the Torah are ways of pleasantness, and all of its pathways are peace. Ergo, you can't use these things that have either thorns on them, or that will catch your finger every time you touch it. It's not good. Therefore, you can't use these objects. Even the kufra, apparently, it has like more of a jagged edge to it after a point. So even if you squeezed it together and tied it, it's still not good, says Abaye, for that reason. So, Amar le Rava Tusfa le Ravina ve'ema tarte kape de tamre. Maybe it means, you're going to see two elements over here. Kape de tamre. that maybe the idea is that it has to do with the actual dates, and therefore it's in the plural, and that's what's being referenced here. That it's related to the notion that it has to be date palms that have dates and a lot of dates associated with them, making the tree heavier or some such thing. So that's basically a rejected. Kapot ktiv. If you look in the Torah, it's kaf, pei, tuf. There's no vav in kapot. We have the tradition that we read it as kapot, right? Kapot tamarim, but it's really kapat. It's really in the singular. So that's not going to work. Ve'emachad lahu kaf karile. So, the idea that maybe the reason why it was written that way is actually to teach us about the tying up, a tying up of the lulav in a particular manner if we're faced with the challenge that it's coming apart at the seams. So we could say that maybe when it's by itself, it's called a kaf. So and since it used the lashon of kapot, that's to tell you about the tying part.
But kapot would mean a plural, wouldn't it? Of kaf, kapot, so means branches instead of a single branch.
Yeah, but instead the Torah used the language kapot, but it wrote it as kapat. So Rabbi Yehuda and his team, whatever you want to say, his supporters or Tarfon, are basically saying, the fact that Torah went out of its way to write kapot, kafot, even though it's pronounced kapat, it's pronounced kapot, but it's spelled kapat, is to teach us there's another limud in there. What's the other limud? Because it said kaf tamarim, like you're saying. Why kapat tamarim, which we pronounce kapot tamarim, to teach us davka, the way it should be, is tied up. Now, we don't accept that drasha, but it's still there. Okay. Sinehara Barzel Ksheira. What is Sinehara Barzel? Hard to know offhand. When you just see it, it's like, what is it? So again, it's that there are leaves, and then you see the shedra practically. You can see like it comes to a point as if it was the end of the lulav, but then there's another lulav coming out of it. It looks like bubbles, one after the other. That's Sinehara Barzel. That's kosher. Amar Abai lo shana el sherosh shel zeh magia letzadikar shel zeh. It has to have some overlap. Aval ein rosh shel zeh, the top of this one, magia letzadikar shel zeh pasel. If the top of the one doesn't make it to the main part of the next, so it does still look sort of bubbled, and it is small little branches, but the branches are at least overlapping. If not that, then it's not going. That's going to be pasel. Tani nami hachi. We learned also. Sinehara Barzel Psula. That Sinehara Barzel we learned elsewhere is not kosher. Our mission says it is kosher. Ela Shma Mina Ke Abaye. Really, we should learn like Abaye. What is that? Shma Mina. We should learn in the manner of what Abaye had said previously, namely that Sinehara Barzel could be kosher in a case where the top of the one goes to the main part of the next one. So it shows that there's overlap. The rosh of this gets the ikar of that one. The rosh of this one doesn't make it. This is puzzle because it didn't make it. This one, it makes it. Sinehara Barzel. We have to follow. That's if we use Abaye's method, this, and it turns out it this way, that's kosher. But when did it say it's puzzle? It's when it's like this. Yeah, that's sort of the reconciliation. Top of the next page. V'ika derami le mirma. Now, those who said that in fact it was written as a contradiction. It comes across as a contradiction between the Mishnah and the Braita. And on account of this question, we got Abaye to clarify it. Tanan. Sinehara Barzel kosher v'hatanya psula amar Abaye lo kashya kan sherosh shel zeh magia letzad ikar shel zeh kan shein rosh shel zeh magia letzad ikar shel zeh. Why is it repeating it again? Because here we see that there was a give and take in another Braita that's being quoted here basically to tell us, okay, that's exactly the answer that was given. The one that our Gemara came up with in 32a is on 32. But Amar of Marion, Amar of Yeshua ben Levi, Amillah, Tani Rabba Bar Mary Mishum Rabban Yocham Ben Zakkai. All of these say in the name of Mishum Ben Zakkai. There shtei timrot yesh begay ben hinom. There are two date palms growing in gay ben hinom. Ve'ola ashen bi beineim, and there's smoke coming from between the two of them. V'zeu shishaninu tzine hara barzik sherot. V'zui pitcha shel gehenim.
Oh boy.
I don't understand any more than you do, but that's what it says, right? It's the tzine hara barzel here, they're kosher. And by the way, in case you were having a good day, it's actually at the entrance to Gehenna. Where's Gay Ben Hinnom? Everyone who's been to Yerushalayim has seen and been to Gay Ben Hinnom. You just don't know you've been to Gay Ben Hinnom. If you go to Shar Yafo, and instead of going into Shar Yafo, you make a right and you continue along the road, you will see off to the right of you. To the left will be the old city, and to the right, that's Gay Ben Hinnom, right there. And in fact, you cross over Gay Ben Hinnom if you want to go to the Mount Zion Hotel. If you know where that is, the Mount Zion Hotel is actually on when you're driving, it's I guess on the right-hand side up top. It's near where the Bacon Center is. If you go down near Emek Rifaim, go down to the Bacon Center, walk down that street, and there you're looking at a valley, very beautiful. That's Gay Ben Hinnom. That's what they're referencing here. What exactly does it mean that it was Gay Ben Hinnom? So we'll have to come back another time when we're more inclined to get into these issues of trying to understand what does this cryptic sentence mean. Clearly, if it came from the mouth of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, it's not a flight of fancy. There's something to it, but not for tonight. Okay, it's 8:50. Instead of delving deeper into this sugya, I'd like to take 10 minutes, and I'm really on the clock, 10 minutes, to finish what we were doing in the world of Baal Tosif, and hopefully, even if you don't remember all the shitas, it'll at least wrap it up. It'll wrap it up. So this is the Shulchan Aruch. In other words, getting down to here's the bottom line about Baal Tosif. When does it apply and when does it not apply? So here you have it right here. It's just the word im over here. Im. Okay. This, by the way, was also from our Gemara from before. We just don't have time to see it right now. So im. Chaser lo echad me'aminim le'ikach min acher b'makomo. Don't take another one. If you're missing one, you can't add another one back in. That was our Gemara that we saw on page 31b about taking a rimon, a quince, a pomegranate, different kinds of things, right? So now, Yud Daled. Lo yosif min acher ala daled minim mishum bal tosif. The Shulchan Aruch paskins, if you add another element to the daled minim, that would be bal tosif. That's what's written right here. Yeah? Then the Shulchan Aruch writes, Lo yitol yoter milulav echad ve'etrog echad aval ba'arava v'hadas mosif ba kol ma sheyirtzeh v'yesh mi sheposel. Sorry, I'm just doing a lot of reading. Don't take more than one lulav, one etrog, but for arava and hadas, take as many as you want. V'yesh mi sheposel aniach hadas shota belulav nosaf al hagimel. And there are those who are posel putting a particular kind of hadas called a hadas shota. We'll get to that. We're not up to that in the Gemara yet. In addition to the three that you have, bedin avot, of the way in which it's overlapping. But there are those who are matir. But it's from here, this source, as the Mishnah Berurah will point out, aravot. It says arvei nachal. It says anaf eitz avot. And arvei nachal. So the drasha is that perhaps it really refers to a multiplicity of them. I'm not exactly sure how that nafetz avot works, but okay, let's not get off topic. So here, nunchet, we're going to see nunchet now in the Mishnah Berurah. It's going to take us to the Bir Halacha. So nunchet here, lo yosif min acher. I also discovered this just the other day. Lo yosif min acher. Ayin bebeit Yosef the daitu dafilu im eno mechavein lebehedjel l'shem mitzvah lulav gamkein aser. The Beit Yosef maintains that even if you didn't think I'm trying now to do Baal Tosif explicitly, I'm doing this for the sake of the mitzvah lulav, I'm adding roses, it's still aser to do. That's the Beit Yosef's contention. Then he tells you the Mishnah Berurah, look at the Bir Halacha. So you know this was written by a committee, and this is the Mishnah Berurah the Chavetz Chaim himself, the Bir Halacha. Mishum Bal Tosif. That's over here. Okay, hope you're all with me. Didn't fall asleep, but here's how it goes. Hinei yesh deot ben harishonim. There are different opinions among the Rishonim about what Bal Tosif is, and you're going to see some of the things we saw. Ita Amr, there are those who hold the Afagav, the Amr in Gemara in Sanhedrin. We saw this the last time we learned. The Lefima de Kaimelan Lulav Ein Sarich Eged Afili Im Agdo Lemin Chamishi B'Yachim Arba Minim Command Lo Agdo Dami V'Chol Echad Lechude Kai. Yeah, I don't know what I just did here. Okay, so turn it off. Okay, the point is that there are those who hold. We saw based on the way the Gemara in Sanhedrin presented things. If you hold that you don't really require an eged, the Rabbanan hold you don't need an eged on your Daled Minim. So if you used a fifth foreign item, we'll use roses, or you used saran wrap, whatever it is, to tie it up with the other four, it's like you never tied it up. V'chol echad lechude, they're all standing alone. Yeah, they all exist in a vacuum in a way. They're not, because they're not connected to each other. It's an accident. They look like they're together. They're not really together. Hainu rak le'inin she'ein migra b'zeh. Just that it's not going to detract, according to that opinion, because you need the four species, and they don't have to be together. So there's nothing uniting them. It's just the fact that you hold four species. You hold other things, doesn't really matter, right? Lo migra b'zeh ha'arba minin v'yotze behen. You'd still be yotze. Okay, now. Aval al kol panim over b'zeh alav de bal tosif ayin betosfot Sukka lamed aleph amid bet dibra amad chahol. This was the punchline of the Tosfot that I did not feel I did a good job teaching, but I forget it already. You can't win them all. Tosfot had said that you could have a situation where you didn't fail at performing the mitzvah, but you also committed an Aveira at the same time. What Aveira is that? Bal Tosif. If you hold that you don't need to tie up all the four species, and therefore you didn't, but you added a fifth and you decided to tie it up, even though it's not required. So you were over at Bal Tosif, but you didn't destroy the integrity of the four, because the fact that it's tied up is maybe stylistic, but it's nothing to do with the halacha. For Rabbi Yehuda, it is crucial. But the Bali Tosif maintained that is already Bal Tosif as well. There are others who disagree with other opinions. The mitur from the Tur mashma, de'eno over ad sheich ad. I don't know what's going on here. Ad sheichavin l'shem mitzvat lulav. You're not going to be over according to the Tur until you have in mind, I am trying to add to the mitzvah of lulav with tulips. That would be a problem. Uve Elia Rabba mochiach me'arosh. Elia Rabba was an Achron, but he's quoting the name of the Rosh. The Sfarli Kabeit Yosef to the Rosh held like the Beit Yosef. Again, what did the Beit Yosef say? Right over here. He holds that even if you didn't even think about it explicitly for the sake of the mitzvah of lulav, it's also prohibited. And as the Beit Yosef wrote in his Sparks Notes edition on the top over here, what did he say? It's Baal Tosif. But there are different opinions. But he proved from the Rosh, the Sfarli Kabeit Yosef, and not like the Mari Vial, the Kavan Shehu Bizmano, and here's the time factor. We talked about this also. Not in the Rosh, but in some of the later people came right after the Rosh. The Kavan Shu Bizmano Afilu Bistama Gamkin Over Im Lodehu Mitkavein L'Shem Noi Ba'alma. Unless you had negative kavanah and you said, I'm just doing this to beautify the mitzvah, then the fact that it's the time of the mitzvah of lulav and you added one of the species, you added another type of vegetation, that is already being over in Baal Tosif. Stam, we assume you're doing it for the sake of the mitzvah, unless you had in mind of doing it for noi. The Itamar, there are those who even hold the kaven dechol echad lechudekai, since they're each one standing on their own, they're not connected to each other. The mele and over gamkin al Baal Tosif, you're not really going to be over in Baal Tosif at all, because there's no object to add to, because there's no discrete object, just disparate elements in my hand. Aval mikol makom, here's the bottom line. Aval mikol makom lechila asim midrabanan lekule amad denira kimosif. It looks like you're doing Baal Tosif. V'shita zu hiskir hagraba biuro. And this is what the Gra quoted as well. V'af de le'inyan aged mikilinan le'el b'seif aleph leogdo b'min acher. Even though it's true, you really to make an eged where makel you could use another mean, doesn't have to be from the made from the lulav. Af lechatchila, even lechatchila, it's okay. V'lo chayshin lehosafa. Why? Because it's just going around this way. So shani eged deino notlo derech gedilato. Why is it different? Because the eged that you use is not in the way that it grows. Remember, to be yotze the mitzvah, we always hold the etrog upside down to make the bracha, because the Gemara says in Psachim and Davav, mida'agbe nafke. When you lifted it up, you did the mitzvah already. So what do we say? Lift it up, make the bracha, and it's over lasiyatan, and then you flip it over. Now they're gederach gedilato. What's never gederach gedilato? A ring that's going this way. So that's what the Mishnah brings. That's the distinction. Inami hata muchach de'ena osel mitzvah ela l'noi ba'alma. Also, a second answer, it's obvious in that instance where you're tying the kushla up. That's only for noi. You're using a nice ribbon to make it look nice. Masha'en can't be nanena. That's not what we're talking about here. Here we're talking about where you added it in. That would be a problem. By the way, no one should try this at home, but it mentions, last thing, Hatsover lulav b'tseva yarok kadei she'yeh nira lach ein bo mishum bal tozif. If you use paint in order to color over your lulav so it looks more green, that would be fine. You're not actually over on Bal Tosif. Right in here in this little summary of the Bir Halacha, we got all sorts of different parts of what we had talked about in Bal Tosif. The bottom line is don't use it for, don't add elements. You'll be over on Bal Tosif according to many poskim. Not all, but according to many. It seems to be the consensus position, and that's what the Bir Halacha brought down. Okay, I'm sorry to cut it short. I always like to stay in chat, but another meeting beckons, believe it or not. So thanks very much for coming. And God willing, next week, my goal is not to start with more Gemara, but now to go beneath the surface. What is Kitei Machlat Shiurei? What's going on in the Gemara in Chulin Daf Peitet? What does the Ritva say? What does Tosfot say? We'll get into it. That and more, God willing, next Monday night.